Here we go.
Oh, mamma mia, we have the Italian here today. Hello, guys. Hello, guys. It's a pleasure
Hello,
being
finally
here.
here. We've been wanting this for weeks, and now we have you here in the aftermath of this blog post about approaching school through Super Memo. So hopefully we can use that as the topic of discussion. So do you
For
want to give
sure.
a brief summary of what it's about, and then we can talk about the details?
Absolutely. The blog post is actually very simple. Like, a lot of people look for particular strategies when facing studying with an SRS system. But I think that instead of strategizing a lot around like questions, materials, sources, a very simple solution to approach school, at least for what concerns very mnemonic subjects like, let's say, anatomy, biology, stuff where you don't have to program, do math, or really understand some very complex logic. Okay, so it's like A brings to B and B brings to C. That's how biology looks like. In this case, the very simple solution to the question, like, can I use SuperMemo or whatever other space repetition tool for school, is just collaborate with other people. If you collaborate with others and create sets of atomic flashcards, the time that you will save from doing flashcards, from creating those flashcards, because the creation part is what's really bogs down the study. Like, if you're doing medicine, you cannot create let's say 15,000 flashcards by yourself, and it's not a given. It's not to take for granted that creating those flashcards already counts as an act of like remembering or encoding, because if you create so many flashcards, it means like you're probably on 200 to 300 or even more flashcards a day, and when you create those many flashcards, you kind of go mindlessly through it. You don't have an attention span like big enough to sustain that consumption. Whereas using flashcards, as proven by the Anki community, by the way, that's why Anki is so popular, because you have pre-made decks, and with pre-made decks it's much easier. You can just like press the spacebar mindlessly for 2 hours, and that's all the studying you need to do.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with it. Obviously, they've been trying to do that for years within the Anki community. The Anking med people, I think that's what they try to do, but basically save you from the time investment of making the items yourself, right? So do you view it as a similar idea to that, the same idea? Does it differ in any points?
I mean, I think that the intentions are probably there. Like, I'm sure that the spirit is there. I do not really share how they do it, because they are just like Young King team. If I'm not wrong, it's like 8 to 10 people top, something like that.
I think so.
And you can't really create atomic flashcards for all subjects. Like, if you create atomic flashcards for all subjects, we're talking about probably, I would say, even 100,000 flashcards easily for all the medicine course. Just in my collection, I have something like 8,500 elements, I think. And it's what, like 6 exams out of 30, 25, I don't know. I don't know that, and generally you need the flashcards to be put in an order. Like, you can't just go through them. Like, they have to be the first, second, third, fourth. In Anki, they do not really have an order that I know of, at least. I went through the Anking deck a couple times. There is certainly value there. I'm not saying that there's no value in the Anking work, but it could have been done way better. Like as it is, it's a nice try, but still far from the true target, I think.
Mm.
Uh,
So,
oh, sorry.
go ahead, James.
I
No,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say, I kind of expect that the anking deck will continue to improve a lot over time, especially with regards to what you mentioned about the ordinals, like the ordinals of each card, like where each card is presented to you in the sequence of all cards. There's this really interesting point that was made about the advanced English deck that over time, just through lots of different people's feedback, like that deck's been out for maybe 30 years. Actually, that might not be
Right.
true, but it's been out for a long time, right? It's had a
I
load
think
of
it's
people.
close to 30 years.
Yeah.
Right?
And so he basically said, like, over that time, they've just been able to reorganize the ordinals, like the order with which these cards are shown, to try and make it as close to the optimum as possible. And yeah, I feel like there will just be loads more improvements made to that deck, because it really represents a huge undertaking. Like, it's the Anking deck is a like it's sort of like a Frankenstein's monster of loads of different people's like collaborative efforts, and obviously it's just people working in like an undirected way up till now, but they are also working on sort of unifying this sort of these efforts under a platform. They're actually building it at the moment. I just found out recently while I was doing some investigations into Anking and their work. But yeah, I don't know. I've changed my tune, I think, a bit on the whole Anking thing. I think the first time, maybe on one of these podcasts, I said that when I went through the deck, I wasn't that impressed with the quality. I think I said something like it was quantity over quality, but you have to start somewhere. Like 40,000 cards of difficult to formulate medical knowledge is no mean feat, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to do, and I'm like, obviously, I don't agree with using other people's items. If you have an alternative, if you can make your own, then I think that's better. But I mean, to be honest, they seem to be trying their best, and they're doing a pretty good job at it. Like, I've seen some of the items, and not all of them are perfect, but they're pretty good average quality.
Yeah. So I'll clarify my point again. Like, I think it's like extremely impressive within the context of studying for exams. But obviously, my opinion of studying for exams is that it's super cynical and just represents like kind of a really bad approach to gaining knowledge and whatnot. So it is impressive, but I wouldn't go and like study those decks for fun or anything. I wouldn't. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I think that there is a point to be made about the Anking decks. Many people, like, this is not me. Okay, this is the Reddit community and other med students say that to use the Anking decks, you first have to study and then unblock, or what would be the like remember function on Super Memo, and then start reviewing. Like the flashcards come after the actual encoding. Like, it's just more of like a very efficient reviewing system. Whereas in my idea, it should be the studying system. I see it more as that's why ordinals are so important, because to study that material, you have to be a very precise sequence. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. And as it is right now, like, you still have to go through the book. Like, if you want to study with the Pathoma flashcards, you do want to read the book, which is not great either, the book, by the way, if I can make this small. I see many med students using this Pathoma book for pathology or whatever. And it's like this big summary of pathology. You can look it up online. It's not bad, but not great either. yeah, that my only point is they have too few people, I think, for the huge undertaking that they're going through, and even collaborating is going to be somewhat hard.
So that's an interesting point, actually, using the flashcards as the actual study material and not just to remember what you've previously studied. I've always wondered about that, and I kind of feel like there's something about it that doesn't work that well. You know what I mean? Like, if your first introduction to some material is through a flashcard, it seems like that's encoding in a different way than if you read it within the context of everything else and then you converted it to flashcards. You know what I mean?
Sure. I think that's because like flashcards are more personal in a way than like books could be, that in my opinion. Like the valuation pathways that Woz talks about in creating a flashcards are more subjective. Like when you read a book, you still have the authors giving you stuff, but it's different of the authors giving you the question and the answer.
Yeah, I suppose. To me, it also kind of seems like the goal of flashcards, obviously, like you said, is to make them atomic. And something about them being atomic, if you learn them only... I guess if you learn them in the right order, you could still capture, like, the whole... There's, like, a narrative structure or big picture or something like that. And so that could be possible to do. I don't know. I've never... like used a really big pre-made deck like that, so I couldn't comment. But actually, it relates to a point that James made, which is the Enking deck continually improves, and what you seem to suggest in the article is you and your class work together to make items from whatever material you're studying. And to me, obviously, that's good because it's focused on what material you're learning specifically for your class. But the downside of it is every new class has to do it, which is hard to orchestrate, and they're not learning from what the previous class did. You know, they're not building on it.
First of all, I haven't yet collaborated with anyone. Like, for all my exams, I did the flashcards by myself. And it is true, not as much for single classes, because at least in my university they're pretty much the same over the years. Like you would have to add like a very small amount of flashcards, but if you had to give that knowledge to another university, even in Italy, or let's say we make the flashcards in English for my anatomy course and you want that to be used for by, I don't know, Stanford students, they wouldn't be able to make much out of it, because it's probably very different how we engage with the courses. Like I know, for example, that in the US, the anatomy part is not as big as here, but I think that the pathology is the opposite. Like there's more of clinical approach than theoretical approach. So yes, it's not universal, but I think that for the single university, it could be reused over the years, or at least
that would be your ideal. Would be to reuse it and build upon it and make it better every time.
Yes, but I do think that it would have an expiration date, and it, like, you could, like, my dream is to make like this project where we encode atomic flashcards for each subject in a universal way. So we go into the most detail, but we do that sort of narration. Like I think of this as this voice narrating you a book, like an audiobook, but with flashcards, which could actually been done. It's not a bad idea now that I think about it, like having flashcards read out to you the first time. But Yeah, an universal project is what we should strive for, but I think that for individual universities, like in practice, every university would have to make its own flashcards.
Mm. Yeah, do you think, I mean, obviously, when you have an idea about something, it often doesn't matter about the workability because you work backwards to find some version of it that's useful. But do you think this is actually plausible to do to get people to collaborate from a particular university or class and to actually make these very large sets of atomic items?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just jump in here because this part really interests me. Sort of the mass collaboration between people, even though, like, especially when the exams are marked in a way that you're sort of supposed to compete with each other. I feel like how you get people to collaborate with each other under those sorts of conditions is really interesting. How is it in Italy, and is it different to US? I think in the US, actually, I'm not sure in either of the systems how it's marked, but are you marked in relation to other people, or are you marked just compared to a single like number, basically, that stays static over the years?
So for the majority of the exams in Italy, you're marked like with an absolute system. Like it doesn't matter who gets the highest score. It just doesn't matter. Like if you deserve the maximum, you get the maximum. There can be a session where we're like the grades go from 1 to 30, and there can be instances where everyone gets 30. Let's say 5 people go to an exam and it's 5 people getting 30. Maybe next time 50 people go to an exam and they each get like 20 or fail. You always have to remember that in Italy, you don't fail courses. You just fail exams, which means you can retake an exam however many times you like. There is no limit on that.
So in your experience, is it the case that there's sort of a lot of camaraderie? Since you're not really competing with other students, are people more willing to cooperate?
No, people are shit.
Really?
Nah, okay, I'm being unfair to my colleagues. There's this thing we have, I already talked about it. It's called sbobine in Italian. And there are transcripts of each and every lesson in the medicine faculty, which means that we have groups, we go to lessons, because as a med student, you don't go to every lesson. Let's face it, like you don't have the time to study, so you kind of skip on some lessons, but you go to some like planned lessons to record the lesson. Then you go home, and you usually have one more or two more people with whom you transcribe down, like you write down every single part of the lesson, like word for word, add any missing material, because sometimes the professor maybe skips some important or less important topic. You take that from internet or whatever and make this like pre-prepared set of notes that you then share on a cloud, a Google Drive in our case. Mm-hmm. And as far as I know, every university, at least every medicine university in Italy, does this. So there is some collaborative aspect, and I think that at least in Italy, if you could prove without like beyond reasonable doubt that flashcards work so well that you would be missing out, people would organize themselves. Obviously, these transcripts have rules. Like you have to format it in a specific way, otherwise you get expelled sometimes from the group if you don't work seriously enough. Like that's how crazy we are. But depending on the year and on the group, sometimes people are more lax, more like soft, or more hard than others. So there would be differences in the quality of flashcards. And sadly, I think it's a very delicate ecosystem, the flashcards, because if the sequence sucks, it's going to be very hard to study.
Yeah. Okay,
but-
so let's imagine that in, let's say, 50 years, studying with flashcards becomes the norm. Everyone collaborates on these big decks, and everyone is using the same decks. And everyone's grades are obviously higher because using spaced repetition to study is much more effective. What do you think the effect is going to be on... I mean, I kind of just loaded the question, but what do you think about the effect of spaced repetition on like the competition for medical school, or just, I don't know, school in general? Like, since medical schools in particular, they're so competitive already, what do you think the effect of these sorts of tools are going to be?
Like, let's I will say what I hope it will happen, okay, not what is most likely to happen. I hope that if you create a core curriculum that you just give out, like you start the course and you already have your flashcards ideally, okay? And I would say not in 50, I would say in 5 years it could probably happen. You have this core curriculum, and then the competition happens on the exploratory learning. That's where I want it to be, so that you don't have to worry about what you have to know for the exam. You just have to worry about how broad your experience will be, because right now the competition is on the side of where to find the right sources, the fastest way to study, and hopefully if you equalize that field, like if you level that field, and if you gave everyone the same starting tools to at least pass decently or even ace the exam, but then you create the competition on something healthier, because you're not hiding from the others like critical resources, because you can still pass the exam, you can still become a doctor with the flashcards. Like they should be ideally enough to let you pass the exam, even like with I grades. No, not just like the minimum, but the best would probably compete over some kind of exploratory learning, networking even. Who knows? Like, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe it'll transition to more like now being a doctor being a good doctor isn't dependent on your knowledge, but just your bedside manner, because all doctors have relatively equivalent knowledge base, you know.
I think that there is already proof that your bedside manners influence the health of people you're treating.
Right, and they also influence what people think of you as a doctor. You know, even if you're a genius doctor, if you're just mean to people, they don't like that. You know,
I mean,
they're gonna view you as a bad doctor.
Being a doctor is hard. Like I've yet to graduate, but like in Italy, hospitals are overcrowded with patients, but lacking medical staff, which means that you enter the hospital thinking, well, this is about my health. Like, put yourself in their shoes. Okay, you're a patient and you're hurt, or even you even have just a scratch, but you see that as your most pressing problem. Okay, but that is not the most pressing problems of the majority of doctors in there. So, like, people usually express dissatisfaction with hospital because they enter and they think they are the center of the world. And I can kind of empathize with doctors who are a little, not harsh, more like not caring enough for these patients, because it's hard. Like there are not enough funds to care about everyone the same way. So maybe you have to run to get some scan from the laboratory, and some patient is just like being anxious. Like I saw this 50-year-old man start crying on his bed, but he was the best patient. Like he would recover completely. He would not have one lasting effect from the problem he had. He had some I think brain bleeding, let's call it that. But very minor. Okay, still noticeable, but very minor.
Just a bit of a brain bleed.
Yeah, but I mean, we were in a unit where people could die from a moment to the other because they have like major brain vessel conditions. And he was like crying like a baby. He was like, will I ever be able to play tennis again? And you kind of feel bad because on one hand, you want to stay with him, give him the care that he deserves, right? Like, he's a human being. You can obviously empathize with him. But on the other hand, the doctor had to run because he had a lot of tests to run on people. And he was the only one licensed to do this type of tests, okay? So he tried to comfort him, but it was clear that he would need some, like, let's say half an hour talk or an hour talk, or just someone to be nice with him for a while. But people there are always rushing, so it couldn't really be done. Even nurses, at least in Italy, are very busy. Like, they do a lot of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Obviously, the difficulty of being a doctor, a lot of it is the more human aspects and not often to do with the knowledge, although that is an important point. Actually, related to that, how do you view the responsibility of a doctor to stay up to date with the newest findings in the field? Because medicine changes very quickly and it changes often. So do you view it as a responsibility for doctors to stay up to date with that stuff? And if so, do you view it as plausible to integrate it with this kind of collaborative system where active working doctors work on a set of flashcards to help each other stay up to date with the newest discoveries?
So realistically speaking this time, and not from what I hope, I think that the generation of our fathers and parents in general is pretty much lost. I have no hope that they will ever really update themselves. And if anyone from Italy, like any 50-year-old doctor is listening to me, is probably going to say, oh, I go to updating courses, whatever. But they only do like mandatory stuff. I can personally attest to pretty much all the normal doctors that I know not really being updated, or at least forgetting, because even if you update yourself, what you're going to remember is the practice that you do every day. So if you have given one type of antibiotics for 20 years, you're probably going to give the same antibiotic for the next 20 years. And you're going to just keep up with that practice. For example, antibiotics is a very good example of people not being updated. Like, they shouldn't be given so freely to people because you risk killing people who actually have serious problems with bacteria. Would the collaborative system help? I don't know. I think it's a very broad issue. Like, doctors here are not paid enough. They have too many hours to work. Like, it would help. I'm sure some sort of collaborative web system would help. Like, if you had a database shared that every doctor has to know that stuff, and you put there the updates in form of atomic flashcards, it could do wonders. But I'm not sure I would feel good doing that because, again, doctors are very overburdened, and yeah, there's this there's the economic, political, working problem attached to it.
So I guess a related question would be, do you think that these atomic flashcards can actually make people better doctors, or is it just limited to passing the exams? I mean, what is your view of that? Because it seems to me like you could become a way better doctor if you had a well-remembered, thorough set of knowledge that was backed up by space repetition flashcards.
I mean, I think that there are two aspects to this, like the direct and the indirect one. The indirect one, yes, absolutely yes, because you get immersed, you are immersed more easily into the medicine knowledge. So by reflex, you are a better doctor because it comes just easier to you. It's that simple. From a direct point of view, it's an art question, because I would say that 95%, maybe 95 is a little bit much, but 85%, let's say 85% of what you study in university is pretty much useless for your clinical practice. Like every single notion of biochemistry, first year university, like we even have a course of medical physics. I can assure you that's completely useless to whatever clinical, even the biology course is pretty much useless. And the majority of like first year and second year courses, even anatomy, are not really useful in practice. So for the latest courses, like the later courses in your program, it would make you a better doctor for sure. But I don't know about the overall effect, because you would have to filter stuff. Maybe you could add tags like in the Anki collections, like useful for actually being a doctor, useful for the exam.
That's really
So
interesting.
would you just... Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I wonder how much incentive there is to increase your knowledge. Like, I don't really know a whole lot about the career track for a doctor, but is it the case that you're just basically, there's no real chance to jump ahead of the queue, if you know what I mean? Like, is it the case that if you were really knowledgeable, like you invested a bunch of time into learning outside of your work hours, right? And so you had a bunch more knowledge, would you be able to advance your career faster, do you think, than someone who hadn't done that? Or is it the case that you basically just waiting in line to rise through the ranks of being a doctor?
Oh God. Answering this question could land me in trouble, I think. No, but seriously, man, I think that in the public health care, it's probably not gonna put a big dent in your career path, okay? It's gonna have a positive effect for sure. And I'm thinking about, like, let's say a moderate use of flashcards, okay? Not the heaviest super memo, neural review, whatever. Let's say a moderate use, like say one hour a day. It would probably have a positive effect and somehow speed up the process.
Okay.
But
Well, I would just say 1 hour doesn't seem moderate.
okay.
Yeah, that's already, yeah.
Okay, let's say 30 minutes. Let's say 30 minutes would have a moderate effect. To have a significant effect on in the public career, I don't know, it would have to like really kickstart everything about you a lot. So not much on the public path, but in the private sector, man, it could have like huge effect. Because if you learn not just about medicine, it comes down also to business skills, which many doctors lack. Like having even a private clinic. Let's say you are a cardiologist. Okay, you tell people what's wrong with their hearts, and they pay you. But to set up a system that's not just the traditional, oh, there's a doctor in my area, let's go to this doctor, and instead is, oh, is the top doctor, is the top dog. Like, are the top doctors in Italy in the private system better than public doctors skill-wise? I wouldn't say so. At least not right now, but do they have better business skills? Well, yes, absolutely. Like my uncle was looking for what kind of some surgery, like some very delicate surgery, and he found this guy on Instagram. Okay, because this
Are you looking for a doctor?
this
Look no further.
this surgeon was like showing pics of the Da Vinci surgery robot. You can
right.
Google it if you don't know. It's very famous, and Lamborghini cars and whatever luxury lifestyle. So he was basically marketing himself, and that's genius because it's gonna be a perpetuating cycle of people looking at you and saying, "Oh, this guy is rich. He has made money, so he has way more, I don't know, skills than the others." But
It's just funny that a Lamborghini could serve as a, like, hey, I'm such a good doctor that I can afford a Lamborghini. You should trust me to do your surgery, you know? Oh, man. But actually, that relates to a thought I had, which is, it seems like the more specialized your field is, the more, it's counterintuitive almost, the more spaced repetition could help you advance your career. Like, if you're an expert in one field and you're the best at that field, people are likely to recognize you as the best in that field. Whereas if you're just a general practitioner, people might view you differently. Like, oh yeah, he's just a general practitioner, and if I need something more specific, he refers me to someone else. So do you think that spaced repetition is likely to help you advance your career if you're a private practicing doctor in a particular field? Like, if you, like you say, if you're not just a general practitioner, if you're a pulmonologist or a cardiologist or an oncologist or even more specific than that, do you think it would be helpful to advance your career that way just because people view you differently than a general practitioner?
yes.
Alright.
But for the audience, I would clarify, because if they don't know super memo, they don't know incremental reading. Like I'm talking about incremental reading in this case. Like incremental reading for specialists could be crazily useful for advancing their skills in their field and nearby fields, and even very far from them fields.
Yeah, I think this topic is so interesting because it's an instance of like a wider question I have about the incentives for investment in continued learning over your life. And I think that in certain industries, we've discussed this before, I think, maybe privately in the Discord, right? Where certain jobs in certain industries, they have a component of volatility to them, so that you're not paid like a wage, like every week your boss gives you a certain amount of money and that's kind of fixed. They have a certain amount of volatility in the sense that part of your compensation is made up in the form of what's it called? Commissions, like a salesman. So a good example is like entrepreneurship, where that's like an example of like 100% commission, because you're 100% dependent on your own skill to earn money, right? You don't have a boss paying you a fixed wage. So any investment you make that gives you an advantage over your competition, for example, investment in your knowledge by building it through incremental reading, SRS, etc., that's going to translate directly into more money in your pocket, hopefully. So what I would expect to see is for SRS usage to be very common amongst those sorts of industries. But I don't know, I've like looked online, it doesn't seem like, I guess SRS just isn't widespread enough to like investigate this in depth, but that's my hypothesis. I think that there's going to be a really strong connection between, how dependent your job is on your own skills, and whether you want to invest in, like, I don't know, knowledge.
I think that there's a bottleneck. Like, you can be crazy good at your job. And I know people that are crazy good at their jobs, or that have some crazy good skill. But if you can't sell or market that skill, it's all gonna be for nothing.
Well, I think James was like tightening his definition or reference to jobs where it does matter how good you are, so the selling aspect is not still part of the problem.
But
Right, yeah, but it is still a good point. Like, you can be the best person in the world at doing a certain thing, but if you're not able to market it correctly, yeah, that is true.
Right.
like, yeah, I agree with James. Like, let's say you're a programmer. Okay, let's make an example. And you work for Google as a junior programmer, so you make 60K a year. Maybe you start incremental reading about some topics that give you, I don't know, way more immersion, fluency, and whatever with the stuff you're working on. So you submit more lines of codes, and you get promoted and promoted and promoted. I still think that it's still a closed ecosystem. Like, when I think about wages and stuff, that, as James was saying, like this, it's more like wage, like salary people.
Oh yeah, right. If your goal is to not have a cap on your income, the only real way to do that is equity or investment. So
yeah, and you need like other skills than the hard skills. You need the soft skills. They can be learned through Supermemo, I think, but you still need them.
Yeah, I think probably any skill could.
Programming is such an interesting field in this regard, because there's this notion of the 10x engineer. I guess strategy, you've heard of that, right? Like,
yeah.
It's just the idea that the efficiency between coders can vary so much, just because I don't know how to put it, but just someone who's really, really good at programming is better than someone who's okay at programming by such a huge margin. Like, it's like non-linear, the difference between an expert and just someone who's dabbles, Has that been your experience, strategy, actually? Have you met people who are just totally insane?
Some people are way better at it than almost everyone else. That's just the way that it is. And the difference between someone who's really, really good at it and somebody who's just okay is so huge that it really can't be ignored. And what's interesting is a lot of the difference is exposed over time. So a very good developer will write code in the beginning that is much more maintainable, much more extensible. So in the beginning, it might be similar or only twice as fast or whatever. But as you add to that code over time, because it was written in such a vastly more maintainable way, that's when the true value of the 10x developer comes out.
Yeah, that interests me so much. It's just like, you can, I don't know. It's just fascinating me to think that someone could be literally do like 90% of the work, and just you could have a bunch of other people there in the company doing like 10%. That person is literally just carrying the whole company, and that is actually a realistic thing, just because the difference in productivity in programming is so large.
Yeah, and it's, in a way, this is kind of obvious to say, but much of that difference comes from the initial approach to the problem in the first place. It's not as if they're just better at like writing lines of code or better at solving some problems, but they figure out faster approaches to problems, so it takes them 8 hours instead of 80. So it's that kind of thing. But just a related point, even if people know that something is really, really good and useful for them, what is the hope that the majority of people will adopt it, or even a significant portion? I feel this way when I look at a fat doctor. I go, come on, man. You could not be more knowledgeable about what the negative effects of being fat are. And yet, you're still fat. And I just can't believe it. And it's like, dude, people just don't like to do things that are difficult, even if they truly know deep in their bones that it would be useful and valuable and help their life in all kinds of ways. So I'm not that hopeful that we'll ever convince doctors to like use spaced repetition systems to improve their doctoring or stay more up to date on things, you know.
Oh, no, I agree. Like, you have to create the right environment for it. It's the same with like fat people. Most people are fat because we sell junk food. We have no need for junk food. Like, there's no need for that food to even exist in the first place, or to put, I don't know, 20 grams of sugar into some snack. But we do it, and as like, if we continue to do so, people will be fat, and being fat also doesn't impact in the short term. I hope that with flashcards, if you don't use flashcards, you will be seeing like a major loss in the short term compared to other people. I think that's what's gonna bring doctors in.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but I do feel like there are short-term negatives to being overweight. And again, I don't want to be disrespectful of people who are overweight. Obviously, there are a lot of reasons, and much of it is a psychological thing, and it can be really tough to get that under control, and I don't want to dismiss that. Obviously, it's difficult, and maybe work circumstances are different, and you wouldn't be perturbed by certain psychological things. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, it could be different. But, yeah, it just seems... Okay, well, let's invent a startup right here, guys. Let's make a startup where we solve this problem for doctors. We totally put them in the right environment. We make all the items. We improve them over time. We collaborate with all kinds of doctors and medical students all over the world. There we go. Startup idea.
Man, it would be really good. I suffered so much through my path. I think that the only reason I didn't become fat, or at least very fat, was because I never really did stress eating. But if that was a thing of me, I would probably have become really fat while doing medicine.
Dude, but the weird thing is, it seems like no one likes medical school. Like, no one likes it.
I mean, it's hell. Like, everyone knows it's hell. Like, I'm waiting to have the discussion with the anatomy professor for the future experiment, right? And I want to ask him, like, do you believe that this amount of stuff is human? Like, there's any person who can study all of this without going crazy? Like, I'm just curious. Like, do you believe, or do you know that what we're doing here is just trying to put a patch on a huge wound that's festering? Like the professor I spoke with for my thesis, the main one, actually knew that in the medicine faculty you're required to know too much, like way over the line of realistic.
Can you give us your intuition on how much a doctor remembers of their education, let's say 10 years into their career? Because we all know everybody forgets things if they don't review them. So I imagine a doctor forgets just unbelievable amounts of information because they're not actively reviewing that, and so it's just gone. Do you have some intuition about that from speaking to doctors and this kind of thing? Do they often forget all kinds of things?
So, like, people usually remember through association, right? Like, if you can't associate an idea to something, it's very hard to remember. Like, let's say a sequence. It's really hard to put a sequence through super memo and remember it for 20 years, right? It's going to become a leech. In medicine, you have to process so much, that it's very hard to form association and connection among all the topics, subjects you go through, because you just don't have the time. You have to let it simmer. I don't know if anyone here, no, probably not, but if you ever tried writing fiction, or even non-fiction probably, you have to wait for some of the story to come out by itself. You can't force it. Like you have to wait maybe a day or two after you've wrote it and reread it and see how it went. It's the same with medicine. Doctors do not have enough time to form long-lasting memories, I think, because the material is just too much. So I would go as far as to say less than 5% probably.
Less than 5% of the original material they learned is remembered 10 years later.
Oh, I would say 6 months later.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But I don't think it's a forgetting problem. I think it's like the starting problem. Like you have just too much. Like there's just too much to remember. It's never gonna be possible. Even with an SRS, I'm not really sure that those atomic flashcards will be used for the long term, because at some point the pyramid will crumble down.
Here's what you should do. When you start this project, right? You should give out a certification once you complete the course. And so that when I go look for my next doctor, I'll say, did you complete Fowl's course? And that's how I'll determine the quality of doctor.
I think that there are many applicable ideas on how to monitor like doctor knowledge. I don't even know why we don't do it. Like you could just put out some tests. Like, I mean, it's at least in the public sector. Maybe in the private sector it's more like your problem if you go to the wrong doctor. But in the public sector, you could just like give out tests and examination periodically to see if people do actually know enough.
Are there any?
It just seems really hard to test everything. Sorry, James.
I was just gonna ask, like, do you know of any industries where there's like rigorous testing across the career, if you know what I mean? Like, I can't think of any industry where they do like proper
lagged out
lifelong testing. You know.
Oh no, James.
We lost the Brit.
Oh, what? Really?
He's back. He's back.
Sorry, guys. I'll repeat it. I was just saying, do you know of any industries where there's like continued testing over the career path? Because I couldn't think of one. Like, I was thinking maybe like an accountant. I think they have to do a bunch of exams like over their career, but what I'm thinking of is there like some job where you have to take, like you're forced to keep learning, and you're like forced to keep learning by some exam or some external pressure?
Programming, probably.
Yeah, I feel like programming is like that, because if you don't keep learning as a programmer, you just get left behind. Things change too frequently.
Oh, gaming. I think that the most ever-changing industry is probably pro gaming.
That's pretty interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like,
that's a new field.
Like Nias was talking about this the other day, that one of the reasons because he had so much pressure was like, if you didn't play for a week, you sort of lagged behind.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I mean, and obviously the games that are popular don't stay the same for more than like a year.
I mean, it depends. Like League of Legends has been going strong for like a lot now, like 9 years.
But has it been the same structure, the same game, or do they update it, or?
So they put out like new characters, change some abilities of the I mean, there is some change, but the structure is the core structure is the same.
I guess, yeah, I guess that can change the game a lot though, introducing like new characters and stuff, because it changes the whole strategy that you need to take with your team and stuff.
But what's interesting is that the game doesn't actually have to change at all in order for you to need to evolve to keep up with the time. Think about chess. The rules of chess have been the exact same for thousands of years, to my knowledge. But yet, Magnus Carlsen is still leagues better than the previous, greatest of all time, Garry Kasparov. And what accounts for that difference? Machines, computers, chess computers, They can analyze the games and tell you the real best moves. So when you're doing your studying, you're not just thinking about it, you're analyzing it with the computer, you're getting more information. So even though the game of chess hasn't changed, if you don't evolve and keep studying and working on it, then you fall behind. Like the second best in the world, I think, is Fabiano Caruana, and they asked him, how long do you play chess and study chess every single day? He says 10 hours. So if this guy doesn't study chess 10 hours a day, he can't even be the second best, And chess is not a new game. So, yeah, I definitely think you have to evolve in order to stay up to date with that.
Man.
Okay, so we're pretty late in the podcast. I'm going to say something controversial. Okay.
Oh.
Magnus Carlsen, genius or fool? Okay, that's going to be the subject of this rant. Okay. So Magnus Carlsen is someone of like generational levels of intelligence, right? He's extremely intelligent. In an entire generation, you might only get one Magnus Carlsen, right? But he's squandered this talent. He's completely squandered it on playing what amounts to little more than a children's game. Okay. Discuss. Discuss.
Oh my god! A children's game! That's what you call chess? Oh.
So, James, can I expand by saying that, so basically soccer or football is good because players are stupid, so it's acceptable? Is that what you're saying, right?
It's like, if you think about the potential contribution someone of Magnus Carlsen's level of intelligence could have to the world, to society as a whole, right? And what he's using it to do. The two are totally, opposite.
Do you think that being great at chess automatically means that you would have been, a great scientist or something?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. And it's not like a strongly held opinion or anything. It's more just to get a rise out of you, to see what you would
Okay, I want to know Strat opinion first,
yeah,
and then I will
want to
change
know,
mine
let's explore it.
consequently.
Oh, so what I'll say is I don't think being good at chess automatically means that you're a really bright person. I think it means you're good at chess. I think it probably correlates with intelligence, but I think it's possible to be really good at chess without being good at much else. But by all accounts, Magnus Carlsen really is a genius, not just in chess. I mean, for some reason, I believe he's the number one fantasy football player in the entire world. Like, I think he predicted it so accurately that he's the number one player in the whole world.
So when I
could be wrong about that, but I think so.
So when I said he squandered his talent on children's games, and you disagreed. No, but what was I going to say? I forgot him. But yeah, I don't know. I just it was about the definition of genius, right? Because I think we've discussed this before, and we both agreed that the definition of genius wasn't simply being intelligent. It was actually it actually requires that you make some sort of contribution into the real world, And I'm just not certain that playing chess very well counts. I don't think it counts enough to be considered as that component of the genius part. I think he's very intelligent, but the contribution that he makes to society is maybe not enough. Although maybe I'm underestimating, how much his performance in chess contributes to the world, because maybe leads to the development of like new strategies, new understandings of how to, I don't know, strategize under uncertainty and stuff like that. I don't know. I really
James.
know very
Yeah, I
little
mean,
about chess, but
he's a special player. There's nobody really like him.
Mm.
And watching him play, I'm garbage at chess, so please don't take my opinion here as useful. But watching him play, in my view, it can be like really amazing to see, because people often say about him that he can squeeze water from a stone. You know, like in the end game, he's particularly good at the end games, and where everybody else would have resigned or thought it was a draw or whatever else, Magnus just pulls out a win because he can see something that other people can't see. So to me, that's a kind of brilliancy and perhaps genius. Maybe I'm using the word too flippantly. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, just to get to the core point of what you're saying, if you are blessed with a very high level of intelligence, what is your responsibility to the world to not just sit around and doodle and play children's games?
But by the way, I wanted to say, you know, guys, there is a book where as a protagonist, a woman who was actually also a chess grandmaster in the book, obviously, and you should both read it. You know what book
What's
that
it
is?
called?
The one.
Oh, I
again.
can guess. Ah, yes, yes.
Oh man.
Oh man.
But okay, going back to the topic, like, what is the responsibility? I would say none. Like, if we follow Waz's formula in the next 30 years, we won't have this problem. People will be way more intelligent than average, and we'll have a whole generation of geniuses. So I would very much like to have an entire generation of geniuses than to coerce the geniuses in doing something actually useful.
that's a good point. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, like, he's just following what he wants to do, and I guess that's the at least as far as I know. Yeah. I guess he still enjoys it, right? He's not being forced to play.
Well, he makes millions of dollars doing it, so
Yeah. So I guess he's just.
he's also a model.
Is
He's
he?
blessed with good looks as well, so he's also a model.
Like, this is why I picked on him, because I'm just jealous, right?
Oh, actually, it reminds me. Laszlo Polgar. Have you guys heard of that guy?
Yeah, the one
Yeah,
who rose his three girls as players, right?
Yeah. So he had this idea that he could turn all of his kids, any kid, into a genius, any healthy kid into a genius, and he tried it. And the field he picked was chess, and it worked out for him. All three of his daughters turned out to be three of the best female chess players to ever exist.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if we sit here and say, oh, being good at chess is pointless, why not use your genius for something else? It's kind of like nullifying his experiment. You know, like, he wanted an objective field, because chess has ratings. So he wanted an objective field where nobody could argue that they were the best in the world.
Yeah.
This kind of proves that if you raise people in the right way, they can be pretty much anything. By the way, so
Yeah, I remember an anecdote about one of the Polgar sisters. He woke up in the middle of the night and saw one of them playing, and they were very young. And he says, "What are you doing? You know, leave it alone. Go to sleep." And she said, "No, you don't understand. They won't leave me alone." Like, that's how obsessed they were with chess. They loved it, I guess. They all say that they loved it. And I don't know how he did that, but it's pretty amazing.
man, that's moving. Like that's so good. When you're so obsessed with something, it's really good.
Yeah, man. And I hope that if or when I have kids and I can instill that kind of passion, or help instill that kind of passion in them for something, even if it's a children's game like chess. A children's game? I can't believe you would say that.
I'm glad I said it in
A children's game.
I'm glad I said it right at the end of the podcast, so no one will make it to this
Oh,
no one's
So
gonna
people
listen.
didn't make it so far.
Oh.
Sorry, Magnus, if you hear this. We're happy
It
to have
just
you on the
looks
podcast.
fancy.
Yes, Magnus, please still come on the podcast if you're listening.
You're welcome
We would
on.
still like to have you here. And you don't play a children's game. You're great. You're awesome. Thank you.
Man.
Well, on that note, should we end it?
Yeah, I think so. This was a good one, guys.
That was a very good one. It was a delight to
Yeah.
have you on,
All right.
Fowl.
It's
Yes,
been a
absolutely.
pleasure, guys. It's really been a pleasure.
All right. See ya.
All right. See ya.
See ya.